Thanks everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to our web presentation in our weekly webinar series that we've been doing over the last few weeks as we've all been shifting to work from home. I think we'll maybe just give folks a few minutes here to filter in, but if you do have any questions as we go through the content, please just drop the questions into the chat and we'll address them as we get going here. And I'm just going to start to share my video and my screen. Hopefully you can see me okay. Hopefully no one walks in my back screen here behind me. Maybe I'll just blur my background. I think everyone in my house is out for a lunchtime walk. So you may see a couple dogs shoot into the room during the conversation, but I think we're okay. The topic of today, obviously, I think we've had a series of content here just based on everyone's thrust and need to get into a work from home format. As you can see, both Yap and I are a little more relaxed in terms of our appearance here today. So I mean, there are some pluses, but aside from being able to work from home and wear a sweatshirt and be a little more casual, obviously there's been a lot of change thrust along with that. And one of the big asks we've had from everyone here is, how do we get working with teams? How do we start communicating more virtually when everyone's in their spare bedroom or office from home? And how do we just create continuity in our business and make sure that everything is business as usual? So with that, if you missed the first couple weeks of these webinars, feel free. We can make sure you get the content. But in essence, what we're doing is trying to just show you in a bit of a gated approach here, where Microsoft is enabling everyone to be more productive on their terms throughout this strange and relatively unprecedented time. So a quick recap here. What is Teams? As you can see, you've joined the meeting here. It's a virtual meeting space where you have the ability to group chat with folks on an ongoing basis, both with one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many formats, and have some virtual meetings. So it can really be extended beyond that to be quite a bit more in terms of tying into your line of business applications, integrating with your telephony system and your file sharing side of things. But at its core, it's a really functional communications platform. So just want to move through some of this. Actually, I found this graphic here in the last little while. What is Teams? People often ask what it can be. Well, it can be a lot of things. And I think this is maybe a situation where a picture tells 1,000 words, perhaps better than what we could do here. But as part of this, one of the core pillars here as part of these features of Teams we're seeing emerge is creating a communications hub or a digital workspace. And that's Yap is going to get into this a little bit further, but Yap from Wizdom LiveTiles has graciously decided to joined us here this afternoon, and he'll get a little bit deeper into where, why, and how intranets are part of that digital transformation process where everyone is shifting into a work from home format. So why is this important? In terms of just bringing productivity levels to the surface, I think we got a little clicky there with our slides. Sorry about that. I think the number one reason here, and everyone feel free to chime in with your thoughts and opinions in the questions box, but it's just knowing where to find things, knowing where to start, both from an organization point of view and from an end user point of view. So as an end user, how do I find the appropriate pieces of information to do my job? From the organization's point of view, how do we push out pertinent and important information to people so that we know that they have it and they can be productive, safe, and compliant in a number of different circumstances? I think especially now more than ever with ability for broad notifications that need to go out to folks, there's a number of different applications here. So an intranet, to me, at least in our definition of that at its core, would be a foundational starting point where everyone lands to find corporate information as a starting point, and they can really be provided with the comms and tools to do their job more effectively. So as we move through the slides here, we'll see some of that. Sorry, just taking a second here for my slides to load. So within Teams as well, we know that it's a unified experience here. When done properly, I think the main point to take away from this is really increased employee engagement. So pushing people to work in a different format than maybe they ever have before is challenging, but how can we make this as simplistic and straightforward for people just to pick things up and run with it as quickly and easily as possible? I know this is a bit of a mental stretch for people, but at its core, with Teams being a communications platform, tying in a lot of the document collaboration, the third pillar of that is really tying in bots. And as you start to work with Teams, and you'll see some of the AI infused through the Wizdom intranet platform, and if you've spent some time getting into Teams within the app ecosystem, there are a lot of interesting productivity bots and little widgets that can be plugged in here. Really, the goal here, if there's one key takeaway from this, is productivity booster. So as a quick example, I have one myself. I've used the Zoom AI bot, and I plug it in there, and it essentially 50 minutes before any meeting I have, it gives me a prompt reminder of saying, you're meeting with Yap, here's the topic, and do you want to defer the meeting? Knowing that it's Yap, I usually do defer the meeting and push that off to another time, or do it and does the automated rescheduling aspect for you. So things that take off the lowest rung of the ladder, or at the start of the day at 7 a.m. I get a summary of my meetings for the day sent over to me. So there's a couple of quick little simple ones, and if we have some time, we'll touch on those. That's really a part of it, and I think the other key piece here is improved search. As you start to put more information together, the most challenging aspect is search. Every single time, search, and I would say, I don't know where my mobile phone is, but search and ability to access that information from a mobile device are really paramount. And of course, compliance. We've seen lots of information here in the last few weeks. I think Zoom has been in the headlines quite a bit for a number of reasons, just based on their ability to make it easy for people to host meetings and connect in a very different world now. But at the same time, how do you keep that information secure? How do you ensure the information lifecycle management side of things, and who has privileges to that, and what are the the retention policies, all of those nittier-grittier, what I'll just classify as information rights management's type of pieces. But how do we do it in a flexible way where we allow people in an external capacity to collaborate, like a guest user access and some of those pieces. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility there, and a lot of things to just think about in terms of how you want to lay this out. And then, of course, I mean, if you can dream it, the technology is the easy part. It's really about the people first, the processes, and how it ought to look next, and then we can make the technology do what it needs to do. So without further ado, that's a little bit of a primer in terms of the base understanding of Teams and where we feel from Batac's perspective an intranet is useful to you and may fit in. But yeah, over to you.
Fantastic, Luke. Thank you, and nice to be joining the Hoodie clan. I too am in my comfortable space. I work from home. I've got 3 little girls running around, and they're all super hyper. I don't think they go to the park enough these days, like anyone else. So there's a lot of challenges around that we're facing. There's a lot of components for the short term, but also for the long term that we focus on. In the chat, there's some stuff happening about Luke's hairband filter, so you might see some beautiful things coming up, stuff we can do to make Teams more enjoyable. So what I'll be sharing today is really summed up in one sentence, and that is, how do we centralize data, forms, and processes? How do we centralize information? How do we centralize application? So I'll be talking a little bit about it. I have a few slides that I have. It's my first time with Teams Live. I'm not entirely sure how to go to the next page, but it seems to work. So across the board, the LiveTiles group, just a few facts. We have customers all over. We got 1,300 customers. We have 8.5 million daily users. We're a publicly traded company, and we have a Canadian headquarters in Calgary. Today I'm calling in from my home, which might be a little surprising, but it's in Red Deer. Usually if I say I'm from Red Deer, people are like, really? So it's an interesting time for, I think, all of us. And today I'll be hopefully giving you some ideas and some things that hopefully we can help you out about and make you think, and in the long term provide some value. So there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of applications, there's a lot of components, a lot of data, there's a lot of ways to work. And there's a lot of things popping up on the market these days. So the question often becomes, how do we work efficient? So I wanted to start with this particular picture. And the reason is that if you're, I think, over 25, you'll probably get the connection. But there's plenty of videos these days where parents give their children, young kids, if you want, a cassette tape, and they're like, okay, well, here's a cassette tape, here's a pen, now make it work. And you have kids, and they're grabbing their little plugs, and they're trying to plug in their whatever they have into a cassette tape, and they're like, where's the Bluetooth, where's this, where's that? So sometimes it's not about that you don't have the tools, it's more about, do you know how to use them? And that's kind of where this one comes into play. When it comes down to working smarter, it's not always desired. So the question kind of becomes, are we in the business of trying to educate everyone, or are we enabling people? Now, when you have, like my kids, my youngest is 7 months, he's now crawling all over the place, and the oldest is 4. Now, I don't want my kids to do the homework with using Alexa. But if I work in an enterprise environment, in a corporate environment, and I need to find stuff, I want to make sure that everything is automated, or at least that the information is whatever they need or they want is at their fingertips. So it works for some and is not desired for others. Now, there's some slides in the last few years, but the point of the next few slides is really to explain is that we have a tremendous, and this is something that people always say, we have a tremendous overload of information. What people don't really talk too much about is that we also have a tremendous overload of application. And especially in the days of working from home, this is something that is only increased more and more. So we have more applications, we have more ways where we store data. So how do we centralize it? So I'll be giving you some pointers and tips that will help the users, will help management with overviews and centralization of data forms and processes, but also will help and assist administrators and the keepers of the platform, if you will. So there's quite a lot of things to do, but how do we make sure that we have the right information? When I did my management classes in uni years ago, they showed some studies, and that is that when you speak, when you do public speaking, roughly every 22, every 23 minutes, what you need to do is you need to build in a moment with a joke or some fun or something, so people kind of jump out of it like, okay, I want to pay attention. The last one I saw was only, I think 2 years ago, and those 22, 23 minutes been reduced to 2 minutes. So people have an instant desire for instant gratification, and it's fed by everything. It's fed by social media, it's fed by your phone, and it can have quite a bit of consequences when people aren't working or aren't used to work from home, and they are often distracted. They have to find, they have to search documents, they have to go to multiple applications, and then it takes a long time to even get back into that moment, into that refocus. So to be more efficient, to have things centralized, honestly, is more and more important than ever. Now, this is from something from Tech Republic, but Gartner released a bunch of studies on this as well, on the average information worker spending the X amount of time on searching for documents and components and information. And there are other stats as well that when it comes down to compiling documents, not centralizing, but compiling components from different areas, takes at least as much time as well. So when it comes down to being efficient, you can go into a tool, you can get everything, and that's something that everyone does, and Luke mentioned Zoom, but there are some potential big consequences for the long term. And even within the Microsoft roadmap, what we're looking at right now, we've got some big releases of Microsoft Search. We got some big releases coming up of Project Cortex that are going to have quite big consequences of the way that people are able to work. But the foundation that you build is very important. It is going to matter. So when you have more and more information, more and more application, more and more data streams, you have less work time, less time to focus, but maybe even more important, you have less time to process information. It's going to have a lot of consequences to work, the quality of work that people are simply able to produce. So with that in mind, what we do and the things that we focus on, and then I'll be covering a little bit on today, is what are the components that you need to be working from home. Now, I work for LiveTiles. LiveTiles is an organization that provides tons and tons of tools for teams, for your intranet, but also for your profile management, your Active Directory. So how does it all come together? How do we make sure that the right people have the right tasks, the right information? How do we make sure that management has not data, but information to make decisions on? How do we make sure that whatever we do now has is beneficial for the long term? In other words, we can create 100,000 team sites, but it's going to cost a company in performance, in efficiency. People won't be able to find something. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks to when it comes down to process, when it comes down to the platforms that you use to be able to centralize it. We want to make sure that every person is able to eventually find whatever they need. And that's our whole mantra. That's what we do. So we try to combine the multiple platforms. I'm not here to tell you that internets are awesome and boo Teams, or the other way around. It's not about, Team is awesome and the internets are dead. There's a time and a place for both of them, but their purpose is changing, and that is very obvious. So I'll walk you through some of the components, some of the things that we're doing, because the foundation that you're building right now with, for example, Project Cortex, with Microsoft Search, is going to have consequences. So sometimes it's more about the process, because in essence, when you create a team, the backend is SharePoint. So when you create a team, in essence, what happens is you create a SharePoint site collection. You then create an Outlook distribution list. Then what happens behind the scenes is an Outlook group calendar is created and a plan in Planner is created. These are all the same platforms, the same components that you also use within SharePoint and your intranet, and how it all comes together. So it's not one, it's not the other. Sometimes it's more about the process to be able to enable your people to be successful across multiple applications. And these are not restricted to just the Office 365 suite. We can go far beyond the Office 365 suite. But the foundation that we have chosen to build our platform and our ECM components on is completely relying within the Office 365 suite. So what it really comes down to is that the way people work, I'll be talking a little bit about components like news, events, and everything that you can see right here. How does it work? How does it come together? And what does it potentially mean for you? Now, I don't want to go too far into the slides, so what I'll do is I'll share my screen, getting some warnings. That's perfect. Luke, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic.
You can see.
Perfect. So I'll be doing just a very quick introduction into some of the core and key components of an intranet, and then I'll show you how they are centralized within Teams as well. So when we look into a typical intranet, I'm not going to go into any details because otherwise we'll be talking for the next 2 hours. But again, if you're interested in this, let me know. We'll set up a meeting with Luke and we'll get things going. But you got your navigation, which is flexible or not flexible, depending on what you go for. you tend to have components that are focusing very strongly on things like news. And then in news, we have a lot of out-of-the-box options. So you can target news based on who you are, where you are, or what you should be seeing. So if I, as a person, for example, I don't care about marketing, HR, or finance, but I do care about new hires in New York, and I only want to subscribe to one of the projects that are available within the channel, I can simply do so. You can see the cards change, and I'm now subscribed to components that are relevant to me, things that I want to see. At the same end, we also have corporate news, where it's more of a top-down kind of philosophy, where there's a letter from the CEO, or this is what we're doing as an organization. These are more of a corporate nature. You can, of course, make things mandatory, so everybody has to see things, but an intranet is changing, its role is changing as well. You can see that the things like workspaces, policies, procedures, events, there's a lot of things that are happening, and its sites, or department sites, if you will, are changing more and more into a static nature, where it's more about, if I go to HR, I want to make sure that I find my forms. We can create bots within literally 2 minutes that will show you, well, this is a bot specifically for HR. We can then index certain repositories and make sure that people are able to find it. But it's not really a place anymore where people go for collaboration. And the same with finance. If I go to finance, then it's more about static information. Maybe I want to combine it into Power BI and view for analytics. But the purpose of what we're doing here is changing. It's changing in this news, it's changing in the menus, it's changing in the workspaces. The collaboration is focusing more and more on teams. So what we've done is we've created this interactive omnipresent panel, which we call a power panel, which shows up wherever you go. So if you go to Outlook, it's there. If you go to Teams, it's there. If you're in SharePoint, it's there. If you go to your mobile phone, it's there. And what happens, the whole philosophy behind it is this panel to the left. It consists of building blocks that you can completely customize according to whatever way you want, however you want it. So if you want to have, for example, building blocks like out-of-the-box components from Microsoft, like Stream, you can make sure that all of your Stream videos are there. Normally it works, I promise. But you can have a lot of components here where your daily task, based on who you are, where you are, or what you should be seeing, is all coming together. And the same will look in Teams. So if I make the switch to Teams right now, I can make sure that all my personalized tasks, all my creation, all my alerts are all centralized alongside whatever I'm doing, to make sure that all my notifications, whether I'm an admin, I'm a content manager, I'm a member and I have policies and procedures to review, it all comes together. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you're just focusing on a Microsoft stack of things. If I go into my notifications, what you'll see is you see IT alerts, which can come from anywhere. You can see the Workday leave request, which comes potentially from anywhere, in this case, Workdays. Same with ServiceNow and whatever. The whole point of this is that we're trying to, again, centralize what people are doing and what they need to be seeing. And all of these building blocks can be customizations, they can be out-of-the-box components, you can use our building blocks, you can create your own, you can personalize it based on your functions, your titles, you can base it on your geographical locations, and it can really be whatever you want. You can really structurize it in a way that suits you and makes you feel comfortable. In the same way that if I'm in Teams right now, but I want to have access to certain news channels, I can simply subscribe from here and you'll see that everything is centralized. So you'll be able to save it and you can work from Teams, you can work from SharePoint. Again, it really doesn't matter. You can target the way that you want to work. Now, don't get me wrong, behind the scenes, it's all SharePoint. But whether you're looking into Teams or whether you're looking into SharePoint, honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. So all of the building blocks, whether you have my recent documents, whether you use governance on this, but also if you want to go a little bit further and you want to go, for example, well, I have external systems and I want to shoot off information to external systems. Now, I'm not sure why people would want to have 3 of these. This is just an illustration to show what's possible. So there's a lot of things there that we have out of the box that you can just utilize. And it's all about, again, the centralization of data, forms, and processes. In the same way, a building block or a module can be Power BI, right? So if you want to feed live information, live streams, we have multiple ways to do analytics, but this is just, again, an example of what can be. Whether you're in Teams, whether you're not, it really doesn't matter. So that's more of a practical matter. Another one is that we also centralize the way that we create content. So whether you're a content manager, whether you're a news manager, whether you're an admin, whether you're just a member, if you will, it can have consequences to the things that you're able to create, the things that you are allowed to create. So one of the big things that we have is that we're able to centralize creation. And the way to illustrate it, I just have a few slides on this. So we have an entire governance engine, provisioning engine, because even in the Microsoft stack and space, honestly, there's just too many choices. There's a lot of different ways that people collaborate. Now, obviously, Teams is great when you work from home. You need something ASAP, it just needed now. A lot of tips, a lot of tricks, a lot of ways to work together. But there's more ways to work, whether you're talking about projects, extranet, ideation, best practices, social collaboration, or whatever you have in mind. When we're looking at the Microsoft stack of things right now, there's a lot of ways for you and users to store your data. And the whole reason why Microsoft more or less released SharePoint was, again, to centralize data. So you have your check-in, you have your check-out, but what you don't want is you don't want people to be sending you documents like, oh, this is the document I have created. And then you've got 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 different versions floating around of the same document on different platforms. So if there's no governance in there, what we're finding is that different forms of information, for example, project information, can show up anywhere. Now, when you have a type of information all over the place, then you really have no overview. And that's when you're going to be asking somebody, say, hey, can you run a report on this? Can you run a report on that? Because people don't know. They don't know what's happening in their own environments. So one of the things that we have is, when we're talking about the centralization of creation, is we have a full provisioning engine. So what we do is we look at your requirements. We say, well, you have a project room, for example, and maybe we want to spin off teams. One of the things that we can do and enhance this is we can enhance it with managed metadata, where we say, okay, now what is the purpose for it? So maybe you as an organization will say, well, every time you create an internal team site, I want to know start date, end date. I want to know if there's a budget. I want to know maybe somebody needs to approve it. There's a lot of things that you can do, and a lot of components that you can combine this with. If I'm talking about an extranet, maybe we're looking at a team site, so you can have additional page properties, so you can manage things a little bit better with additional components. Even in best practice, it can be anything, honestly. The point is more or less to be able to, when somebody wants to create a team site, that they have to fill in additional managed metadata. So a team site will have, for example, a start date. We'll have different roles. We'll have metadata. Now, there's a few cool things about this. From a user point of view, because of the additional metadata, you can have really cool overviews of everything that you're doing from the start. From a management point of view, you can easily have live data, live reports of all the active projects, all the expired projects, all the non-active projects, the projects that are over budget, the projects that are about to expire, large, small, whatever you want, because we're talking about metadata. From an admin point of view, we can make sure that, say, well, I've got 500 projects that are close to expire because the expiration date. I'm going to email all of them, or ones that have expired already, and say, well, you know, Luke, these are your sites. If we don't hear from you, we're going to archive them. So we add another option to it, so you can efficiently archive components that now you have to go manually. So there's a big benefit to being able to manage this. And also from, if we're just looking at my recent document, my collaboration spaces, you can have the most beautiful overviews going forward. You can have filters, you can find components. Obviously, you can go into Teams and you get your row of team site, but an alternative is where you start working with metadata, where a site type might be a project. My projects up for review. You can have the most easiest to understand live data, but also live tasks based on additional components, additional metadata. So these are some of the examples that we have. Another pretty cool example is that you can run pretty much RSS feeds for COVID. So one of the things that we do and that we have here is where you can run information. You can keep people up to date live. These are just examples. Again, they're all building blocks. They're all modules. If there's time or people want to see it, we can talk a little bit more about the ideology behind the Power Panel. But it's all about how do we centralize data, forms, and processes. And with a lot of major announcements coming up from Microsoft, it is important to make sure that whatever foundation you're building is going to benefit you in the future. So earlier I mentioned Project Cortex, but also Microsoft Search. There's a lot of MVPs out there, a lot of presentations, a lot of components that you can find on the internet, specifically focusing on, for example, Project Cortex. And some of the things that they advise you is, for example, when you build an intranet, don't go classic, but start building on modern. When Project Cortex is going to be released, make sure that your Active Directory is up to date. Make sure that you're using information architecture based on hubs and Microsoft Teams. Make sure that you're able to review data and user profiles. Make sure you have a strategy based on structured and semi-structured documents. And the same with managed metadata, enterprise content, and that you have things for information policies and that you're able to have the metadata so you can do data cleansing. So you can have retention, archive, delete, expire. So you can take it out of Azure and you can put it into cheap storage. Project Cortex is going to essentially, if you really want the most simplest version of it, essentially is going to put an AI bot on your content and push it into Teams, push it into SharePoint, push it into Office 365, where it's able to connect your multiple sources of data and present all of its information using AI. Now, obviously, we have our own framework that we can create bots super easy, make sure that we can find information really, really fast and efficiently. But some of these projects, some of these things that are going to come up by Microsoft, they really are going to have a major impact on the market. The last thing that I wanted to show and cover is that one of the key components, like we mentioned earlier, is making sure your Active Directory is up to date. So what we can do is we can actually communicate with people based on predefined sets is, please update your profile. So we can set as an organization to say, well, when we're looking at our internet, I want to target content based on geographical location, function, title, permission, whatever you have in mind. We can set these elements for every person in the organization, and we have a lot of intelligence behind it. So we can work and we can make sure that people can update their own Active Directory information automatically. So people can complete their profile. This can be done through an AI bot like we have over here, or we can also communicate via email with the person. One of the big benefits is that we have an AI solution behind it. So if you upload a photo of, for example, Homer Simpson, it will say, hey, this is a cartoon, we don't recognize it. Another thing is that certain fields you might want to have permission for. So for example, if we ask people to update their title, there's always those one or two guys that update, say, I'm the CEO. So you might want to have an approval process for it. But when your Active Directory is up to date, we can do the coolest things. So you can have, for example, an Active Directory of a corporate directory, company directory. We can make sure that all of the fields are being completed, that pictures are being completed. And then even the next step in this is where we can work with organizational charts. We can all make sure that we can find people, that we can work with the people, and that you can contact whoever you need to contact. So this is all about findability, to set up your structure, to set up your information architecture, to set up your IT to make sure that we achieve your short-term goals, but we're also making sure that you're going to be ready for the future. And obviously, if I go back into Teams, then these components are available here as well. So these are all modules. Any form of the modules can be placed in the Power Panel. It's completely customizable, and its main function is just to serve through security trimming to make sure that people have whatever they need, wherever they are, wherever they're going. Behind the scenes for users, honestly, users don't care. They have the data or they don't have the data. If they don't have it, they're going to email you, they're going to call you, they're going to do their own stuff. You're going to have different versions. You're going to have no updates. You're not going to be structurized around the same data sets, but we can help you to achieve all of those. Whether it's pure information like COVID-19, whether it's company policies, whether it's news, whether it's keeping your Active Directory up to date, we want to make sure that we achieve your short-term goals, but also make sure that whatever we're doing is that we're going to help you for the long run. So that is in a nutshell what we have for you today. So I'll go back to you, Luke, but if there's any questions, then of course we'll be happy to take a deep dive. Alternatively, we're also very happy to schedule one-on-one session if you prefer.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, I did post here just in the chat a further link to anyone interested if they want to read further onto Project Cortex. That is there. There was one question here in the chat from Bradley. Do a lot of the access/success and using some of these building blocks ride on non-Office 365 products integrating with SharePoint? I think there's a couple aspects we can drill into there, but where do you want to start with answering that question?
So I'll start that everything is based either on Azure or SharePoint. The only exceptions is the example that I've showed, for example, with integration in ServiceNow and Workday, but those are integration. So they are just to illustrate the fact that we can provide a link to another platform, or in this case, what we've done is we connected into SharePoint. So you can either use the SharePoint APIs, webhooks, you can use our APIs, and then we can feed some information into the digital workspace. Additionally, what you can also do is you can have search-based applications, and then you build, in the old days, you would say you build a trust between multiple environments. Whatever happens in one environment goes to the other. But to come back to the original point of the question, everything we do is 100% based on Office 365, Azure/SharePoint.
Yeah. Yeah, I know one of the things we're seeing a lot of in terms of getting folks activated with Teams is lightweight project and task management. When you had on one of your slides there, I forget your exact phrasing around the project management side of things, but what are you seeing as just in general best practices for within the sphere of intranets for project and task management?
People who work in IT, we tend to get bombarded with information. The amount of posts that I see, for example, about little things about how to blur your background and stuff, I must see that probably about 20 times a day. But there's a big advantage when it comes down to working with SharePoint and working with Teams. When it comes down to task management, we see more and more components, whether it's whiteboards, whether it's the way that we structurize it, that are more and more going to be available in Teams only. So, like I said in the beginning, it's not about yay intranet, boo Teams, yay intranet. It's about what's the best tool available, because behind the scenes, we're making sure that organizations get whatever they want. So when it comes down to collaboration, project management, and tasks, we see that the focus is more and more on Teams, and we're actually doing the other way around. So instead of bringing the intranet into Teams, we're bringing some of the Teams components into the intranet. And it really depends on the process that is desired, which is a little bit dependent on the customer and your needs. When it goes down to planning, I can tell you what we do internally. There's some really cool things from Microsoft, like whiteboards, like the cards that are available. We have, for example, in on-prem and classic environments, we have a lot of things that we do with swim lanes and Kanban boards and all these type of things, but we're switching ourselves as an organization as well, where everything just happens in team that way. So when it comes down to structurizing the task, we either rely on an app, and we work in pretty much the ways that Luke have been describing as well in previous previous sessions around Teams.
Okay, great, good answer. We had another question here pop in from the chat. Approximately, what is the per user cost for the power panel?
So one of the things that we do, I can probably, can you just, as a follow-up, maybe I can ask that person to tell me how many users they have in their organization. So the license structure that we have, and I'm just going to look up some few things here. The license structure that we have, the way it works is that we license based on user brackets. So if, for example, you, and a user, what I mean with that is the amount of Active Directory people that have access to your Teams, your SharePoint, etc. I'll do my best to give you some indications. So when it comes down to the power panel, what you would get for free is we would basically have what we call a Wizdom for Teams solution. So you get the Teams provisioning, you get your power panel, and every building block that we have available within Teams will be part of that as well. Roughly, do we have a number count yet? More or less?
Approximately around 100.
100 people, okay. So it will be, I would say in Canadian, roughly about 15K a year. Yeah, and then you can be able to organize and you'll be able to strategize and you'll be able to make sure that all of the people within the organization are going to be centralizing their data, centralized creation, but also make sure that all the pushing of content, of news, and everything that you're doing will be made available that way.
Excellent. Well, give it maybe another minute or two for some additional questions to roll in. I think we were targeting to have our presentation span approximately 45 minutes to give everyone a few additional minutes back on their days, because I don't know about anyone else, but I certainly have been oversubscribing to web presentations as a means of ingesting some information that maybe I just previously didn't have the bandwidth to get around to. So hopefully this discussion here on Teams and intranets was useful for everyone. If there were additional questions, we'll be sending out some additional follow-up information here on some other things to think about, like the additional information around Project Cortex and some of these other pieces that Microsoft is working on around their search experience, which I think is fascinating, but not the intent of today's session. So if you do need to look at further content, please feel free to reach out. I'm sure Yap or I would be happy to help point you in the right direction with some further information for what you need. Next week here, we're just in keeping with our theme here of Wednesday afternoon, our weekly Wednesday afternoon webinars. We're going to be digging a little bit deeper on some of the upgrade and user interface enhancements that Microsoft Dynamics is going to be experiencing over the course of the next 6 months to a year. So if that's of interest, feel free to hop on next Wednesday afternoon. And as always, we do have one additional question here, Yap. Let's maybe address that here while everyone's still on the call. Does the product enable self-help, staff being able to update their own personal details that could be integrated with into an HRIS? Yes is the short answer there. There's a couple of approaches, I'm sure. Yap, do you want to opine on that?
I don't see the question, but I'm.
I just made it live here. Just a second.
Okay, I got it. Yes. So the tool that we have is then also able to write into certain HR systems. It depends a little bit, of course, on the connection, but we've done this plenty of times with PeopleSoft and SAP, for example. It depends a little bit on the system that you want to write to, but if there's APIs or webhooks available that we can write to, then I would say I feel pretty comfortable. We've done this plenty of times. It depends a little bit on what the question would always be: what is your the source of truth? In other words, what is absolute truth? Where do we need to write it to? So yes, we could flow it into an HR system. We've done it plenty of times with other systems. If you wanted to have a more specific conversation around your particular requirements, we'll be happy to set it up and we can go into the nitty-gritty for sure.
Excellent. Just the final question that rolled in there was around the hyperlinks on the slides. Yes, we'll certainly ensure that everyone here today has a copy of these slides for their own sake, and you can drill further into any of the content we talked about and hyperlink to there. So with that said, if there are no other questions here, I don't see any further ones coming in. Thank you again for everyone for taking the time out of their afternoon here to join us and discuss the topics here on Wizdom and Teams. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the content. Yap, special thank you to you for joining us and delivering some always insightful knowledge on collaboration and communication intranets.
My pleasure. Thanks for hosting, and hopefully till soon.
Okay, take care. Thanks everyone.